I had the pleasure of going and seeing Dune last week, and I have to say it's one of my favourite films in the last decade. I absolutely love old sci-fi, and I thought let's have a look at making something from the film, and we'll do it in Nomad. What else? So we basically have tried to make an ornithopter, and we tried to do it as low poly as we can. So in this video I'm going to show you some little tips and tricks. I explain it first of all. Nomad isn't the best for low poly, but we can have a bit of fun while we're doing it, and we'll see what we can do with Nomad and making an ornithopter. So let's start this with a little bit of a what it can't do, because if anybody puts a comment that, well, Blender is better than this, or in Cinema 4D I can do this, then I'm going to pull the video and throw it in the bin. This isn't about the fact that this piece of software, Nomad, which is a sculpting app, is the best solution for any kind of low polygon work. The reason I'm doing the video is because I love low polygon work, I love Blender, and I love proper topology work. So I like my cut tool, split tool, extrude edges. That's what I grew up on in the industry. That's what I still like to do today, even after 20 plus years of using sculpting programs like ZBrush and of course Blender now. What this is about is that you can do some of the low poly kind of work without sculpting all the time, and that's what I'm trying to show here. So without being flippant, I just wanted to show that this is not, I'm not recommending that this is the way you move forward. It's just interesting to know that you can do it. So with that said, let's have a look at what we can actually do. So most things inside of Nomad are high poly. So if you open up this sphere, this is any generic sphere. So you want to come up here to display settings and put wireframe on, because most of what we're going to do is going to have wireframe on like this, so we can see what we're actually playing with. And if you look up here on the scene menu, you've got one model or one object, and it's a sphere. And you've got, if you've got the scene up here, we've got 12405 meg free, and our scene vertices are 98k. So it's about 100,000 polygons, which is way too much for anything that's low poly. So the way that we do any kind of low poly work is to bring in a new model. So let's just delete that basic scene, and let's just bring the good old-fashioned cube in. So that's the most primitive that we have. So you know that you hit validate, and it will lock it so that we can edit it, and you can manipulate it with these on-screen manipulators now, which came in a few versions ago. So this is all pretty straightforward even for a beginner. But if you come into here, come down to your topology, and come down to the bottom, you've got some settings. So first of all, we want to turn this off, which is constant density. And that means we can now change the number of polygons that there are, or edge loops that there are in the model. And straight away, we could just bring them all down to 0, and we get a cube. Now you can see how that's reflecting there. That's because we've got a matte cap on. Look here, and you can get rid of that if you change it to a completely dead flat matte cap. That's one way to do it. You could light it differently, so you could say give me always unlit, and then it basically would always give you no lighting in the scene. So we can go, for example, over to, let me just get my bearings, so PBR, so physically based rendering, and also change the color of the model to darker blue, and you'll see that it's a completely flat model. We have to fill it with force paint, or let's make it a little bit lighter than that. Now I'm going to change this wireframe, and I'm going to make the wireframe look like a little bit lighter so that you can see it. That's all, the only reason I'm doing that. So we want to come over here into the display settings, and under wireframe there, we want to make it fully opaque and fully white, and that'll do it. Now you should be able to see that quite nicely. I'm going to turn the grid off for a minute, because all I want to show you is the polygons. And there you go. So we've got a polygonal model that's just 6 sides. We could validate now, but I don't want to do that yet, because I want to make something that's got some symmetry on it. So I want to turn symmetry on in a minute. So I need a center line. So to do that, we come back up to our topology, and we'll, on one of our divisions, so I think it'll probably be on our X division, and I might be wrong. No, X division, I've got one division that way. Now, if I just do one on the Y and 2, maybe 3 on the Z, we've got a little bit of a shape like that. And if we extend it out now, we've got an elongated rectangle. And the reason I've done that is because now I'm going to validate it and work on it, like so. And now I want to manipulate it at the point level. Now, what you're used to with Nomad is you're sculpting on a surface, which is a lot of these polygons and points or vertices, and you're basically moving them in and out based on what's called a surface normal. So you're moving these points up and down based on a set of parameters. So I don't want to get too complicated with that. So what we're going to do is we've got to manipulate just the points without being able to select them, because you don't have the ability to select just vertices in Nomad. So what we need to do is go to the Move tool and bring our brush down fairly low. And that will mean that the area of effect will only affect the closest component. So what does that mean? Well, make sure your symmetry's on. And now let's just see what happens. So if I move this around now, you can see we're getting it moving at the point level. I've clicked in the middle of where the vertex is. If I click in the middle of the face, nothing happens. If I click on an edge, nothing happens. But if I click on the vertex right on the point, then you can manipulate that. So you can start manipulating your shape at the point level. Now, in another program that's designed to do this, or any polygonal program, this would be, you would be able to select those components and work with them. But we're not there yet. That for me is one of the golden tickets for the iPad, which is when somebody actually clicks onto how powerful this would be as a tool, which won't be long now, then we'll get a polygonal modeler that does this. Now, as of today, unless you can correct me and find one for me and show me, I can't find a tool on the iPad that can do that. Now, there is Gravity Sketch iPad, which does some of that, but it's not there yet. And hopefully, I love Gravity Sketch. I work with them a lot. I'm one of what they call a collab pioneer, which means I'm working with them on their collaboration tool, which I'm going to start showing soon. Realistically, they could be the ones that get there first, and I hope they are, because I've got some kind of a relationship with them, so I can, hopefully I'll be able to see that in its development if I'm lucky enough. But we haven't got that yet, so this is what we've got. So if you can see what I'm doing there, I'm just going near the vertice. Now that one's not letting me select it from that angle, so I've had to go to a different angle. And there you go. You can see me moving those vertices around like so. Now, what I've been doing, again, in another program, what I would like to do at this point is run what's called a split loop through certain areas and put extra shapes in there, but I can't. And I'd like snapping, and I'd like lots of other things, but we haven't got that at the minute. So what you can do is, to get a nice edge, you could bring one over the other. So you could bring that up to there, and you could bring that like that, and that like that. Now, when we subdivide, what we will get there is a nice creased edge. And that's basically how we would do it in any other program. But if you start doing this, you can get some nice shapes. Now, what you can do is you can subdivide this, which, again, it's not ideal. We would like a cut tool to go between our vertices and between our faces, but we haven't got that. But if you now just go subdivide, it will round it, which is what a subdivision algorithm does. But we want to subdivide with flat subdivision on. So turn that on and then subdivide, and you get every polygon turns into 4, and it doesn't round it. So you've got a bit more to play with. So where we did this now, you can see we've got a little bit more to play with. Now, you see that area of effect of the brush? As I'm further out, it will select all of that area, which we don't want. You might want that later on, so you can bring the intensity down and the brush size up. And you might want to move a whole area. So if you're starting to make like the front end of a car, or like we're doing here, an Ornithopter, then that's what we're going to need at some point. And you can, of course, hold smooth and tighten it and smooth it. You've got to be careful, because in this environment, that's destructive. That can cause you some problems. But at least we've got some kind of we've got either a point by point. Oops, I masked it by mistake there. We've got point by point, and we've got a manipulation like that over a whole area. So you can get somewhere with it. Now, what you can use this technique for, and what this is useful for, is if you want to make a specific shape and you don't want to start using the trim and the split tool straight away, you could now freeze that or leave it as it is and subdivide it up and then start using the normal or the more normal tools. So you can do that, and you could do things like drill holes in it then, and you could cut things away. And that's what I'll probably do with this project after I've finished it. So that's the way I would use this to get some of the core shapes out. So what else can we do? So let's just hide that, and let's make some other components and see what useful tools we've got to be able to use them. So unselect it, and we'll bring in a cylinder. Let's find a cylinder. Okay, so let's do the same thing again. So first of all, we'll just fill it with a blue, because I want a blue. And we're on, everything else is correct. So just move it to position so you can see it. So let's just go into our topology, and we'll do constant density so we can change every parameter, bring them all down to a reasonable level. So I think we've got a quite a light. I'm trying to make it so that you can see it really easily without the reflection. So there we go. So that's similar to how it was. So I've just taken out the reflection for you there. So because this isn't a standard cylinder, you would have expected this to be just a normal cylinder at the top, and it isn't with this model for some reason. I don't quite know why that is, but it's fine. It's capped off. It's a capped off cylinder. But what are the parameters? So we've got a division of 18. So let's make that a more predictable divisible number, so we know 16 is a useful one. So back down to 8, 4, 2, etc. So we know what that one is. And we'll also go with, instead of 7, we'll go with, let's try 10 on that one. And what we'll do is we'll extend this up, so we're basically going to make some components like pistons, and I'll show you. I'm putting these predictable numbers in, so it's quite easy for me to explain it. So validate it, so I can now work on it. And now the next bit is important. So you go to symmetry. We want to make sure it's enabled, and we're going to work just on this one, Y. So if you're not sure, you can click these until you get them all, the ones active that you want. We just want Y because it's this vertical green one. So if you just put your, just to prove it, if you just put your gizmo on, it's this one here, vertical, like this. So we know it was 16, so tap in 16 in there. 16. And now what you can do is you can start using the move tool, and you could manipulate around like this. And bigger brush will actually not be a problem for you now. That will actually work well. Now I always turn this down, the intensity right down, and that means that you won't mess things up quite as much, because it stops you moving things really quickly. So now just bring things tighter in from different angles until you get the shape that you want. So think about it as pistons, think about it as weaponry, think about it as, you know, I think the idea of pistons is useful if we're doing sort of like sci-fi stuff. Again, you know, be careful, because we don't have a point here that we could, you know, if this was completely a predictable circle, then it wouldn't be a problem, but it's not. So we have to be careful there. What you could do for that section is you could take SEL mask and rectangle, mask it off with holding mask, so sorry, not holding mask, but tap mask and tap the screen, and it will invert the mask. And then that bit there, let me just go back to view so you can move it. You can just use scale on that now. Now watch what happens there. Because it's masked, you can now, you know, bring it tighter and smaller. It went a bit skew whiff then, didn't it? So, oh, I know why. It's because we've got symmetry on and it's odd. So if you bring that in like that, and that could be a way that you do it. If you needed a spike or something like that, that's another way to do it. So and clear that mask, and you can see there now we're making low poly components. So you could start building up a pack of these, and this is something that I do all the time now. And again, if we had more tools, this, you know, it wouldn't take many more tools to make this amazing. Just that cut and split and an extrude, and we'd be golden, really. So this is making a sculpting package do things it's not supposed to really do. So that gives you an idea of some of the manipulation tools. I've only given you a few, but that should give you some ideas to get going. So let's take a look at the Ornithopter and how I did that. Now it's going to be speed ramped, but at least I can show you how I did it over the course of about 15 or 20 minutes. So let's dive right into that. So those of you that do follow this channel, you know I don't like doing time lapses without giving an audio. I just find them quite boring. So hopefully at least I can chatter away to you about what I'm doing here. So I've made a cube again, exactly the same as the start of the video, duplicated it. Just use those predictable numbers whenever you can, 2s, 4s, 16, 32s. Usually helps when you know the numbers for later on. And then I've done exactly what I was teaching at the start, which is I'm just using the brush to pull out the individual points. So I'm moving it wherever I can. I'm just extending it out, not worried too much. Now normally if I was using Blender or you know, if I was doing proper polygonal low poly modeling here, I wouldn't have big long polygon shapes like that. I would you know, probably make them much more square, especially if I'm going to use subdivision modeling. But obviously we're limited, so that's what I've done there. I've had to stretch it out a bit. So the second cube that I made that I left on the side, that becomes the first blade. So same process, smallish brush size, so we can manipulate point by point. Bit of masking there so that I can scale the whole back end to smaller, so that's quite nice. And unlike Nomad, where we're using millions of polygons, this is quite refreshing. So masking is really quite useful with this kind of low poly work. So there I'm already thinking about how the blades are going to work, and if you've seen the film you know that they don't really they don't act like wings. They're helicopter blades that actually go up and down like dragonfly wings. So you have to think about that early on, about how that's going to work. I wasn't really using too much reference here. I was looking at one image, so I was just thinking about how they would actually work. And there's a point where the ornithopters dive and the wings fold back like a hawk rather than a dragonfly. So I needed to make sure that they were the right sort of length, and then they would go back. So now I'm back to looking at the core shape again, and I'm just thinking about how it would be made up. So minimal moves, just point by point. If you tried this with a high polygon model, it's just not going to work for you. So here I'm manipulating still at a very, very low polygon count. And don't forget, this is this is a limited system for low polygon work, but at some point you can freeze it and you can subdivide it, and we'll have a look at that when it happens on screen. Normally when you subdivide, it rounds it, but you can turn that off, and you do what's called flat subdivision. And flat subdivision just means it will times every polygon by 4, and you'll see me do that in a minute. So you can see there I've shaped it a little bit more. It's a bit more like a helicopter at this point, or some kind of sci-fi helicopter anyway. Again, just checking those blades, scaling them up a little bit. Still very, very low polygon. There's hardly any polygons in this scene at all. So I moved on to something like the skis. So what's it going to stand on? Cube again, some predictable numbers, just get it down to a reasonable sort of size, and then down it goes, and then mask it, and then I'm just starting to manipulate it. So you can take a lot more time over this if you want to use or try this kind of thing. So just literally use probably better reference than I did, and take your time building these kind of components, because these make all the difference. This is the visual interest, and this is what breaks the silhouette up. So this is the bit that can really make the difference in your model. Again, if I was doing this with some kind of polygonal model, it would be a very different process. And I think it's probably about time I started teaching some of that, because it is my in all honesty, polygonal modeling and box modeling, as we used to call it, is probably overall my preferred method, because it gives me good topology, and this isn't going to give you good edge loops. That is one of the big problems with this. This is going to get you a fairly low poly shape, but it isn't going to give you anything that's that I would even remotely call good topology. It's clean, so it's mostly quads. In fact, it's all quads, but it's not ideal. So I seem to like I'm moaning a lot, and I'm not, because it's just nice to, it's nice to be able to do this on the iPad. But obviously coming from a background where I can cut and split and extrude and all of those other amazing tools that we get in most other programs, then it is somewhat limited. So you can see there I've just decided to start making some of the components. So I'm making how the rotor blades work, you know, from the root, so to speak. So I've put in some cylinders, and again I showed you that at the start. I've duplicated them, moved them around, just use them over and over again. And again, if it's too many polygons, just go back in and keep it unvalidated, and you can change them whenever you want before you finish the model. Just simply, you know, Control C, Control V, you know, kind of scenarios going on there. So I'm just basically copying them, as you can see. So I'm using PC technology on an iPad now, so it is becoming mainstream, isn't it? So yeah, just copy and paste it, and then you can see the shapes building up. The visual interest is coming now, and you're starting to see how this is going to come together from an operational point of view. And that's what I really like. Is I'm thinking all the time, how will them blades work? Can they flap? Will they? I'm not bothered that they're intruding into the body at the moment, because I can work on that at a later stage. But I'm just literally thinking, how does that mechanical procedure work? Does it pivot from the outer one? Does it pivot from the inner one? You know, it's just a lot of solutions that come together to make your final model. And again, if you are a polygonal modeler, you'll be very used to this kind of process with a bit more control. So there you can see now I've decided to just change the body to react a little bit. What I did there that's interesting is I turned off smooth shading, and you get a very you know, I don't know what the right word is. You can see some of the area where the polygons are turning, and it's not always my preferred way of doing it. And then I decided to change the HDRI, so change the background a little bit, change the lighting a little bit, just so that I could see the shapes. And again, this project is all about a low poly shape. I'm not looking for perfection. Just looking for, you know, something that looks good in a scene, and I probably will get this animated in another program at some point. So again, I've got outline on there, which is useful. So you have to be careful. I think you'll see it in a moment. Sometimes when you go to that center line, you'll snap together the model. I think it happened just then, and that's not always brilliant, because obviously that can cause problems. So I undid that. And now I'm just trying things like how to work out the undercarriage there. I tried the back door underneath. Back onto the blades, just making sure they work again. You know, trying them and seeing what they look like in different positions. Now you can see it's becoming a true Ornithopter now, because it's really beginning to, you know, work out how it can flap and fold and all of the things that I would want it to do. And it's all working quite well. So I'm testing where the pivot points for the legs would be, for the back door, all of the anything that's going to move. I'm trying to work out how I would put it in place in this design. So here I moved on a little bit further, and it's changed to a blue colour there. So I've done it much more like a blueprint, which I always quite like doing that kind of thing. I added this actually, just a cylinder for the floor, and I didn't like it, so I get rid of it quite quickly, because I didn't really need it, to be honest with you. It was just to level the feet and the back door, but again, I didn't really need it, so got rid of that. So there you can see again, I'm just making sure those blades work, and now I'm thinking, right, let's get this. We've got the overall shape there now. So maybe it's time we started looking at getting, you know, subdividing it up a little bit. So I think with the blades, I've got them a little bit higher resolution now. Going back to the lighting, and then next bit we looked at was we moved on to doing some visual interest for the feet, or the skis. So again, we did exactly what we did at the start of the video. We used the cylinder, and we're going to make a piston. And that piston is useful for a number of things really. I'm going to use it several times on the leg. I'm going to use it several times on the on both legs actually, duplicate it, then triplicate it in some cases. So I used a slightly different technique there. I used a mask in the middle and then scaled that in and then up, and that gave me the effect that I wanted. So I duplicated it, brought them together with a simple merge, and then that's one of my pistons, and I started to use that underneath. So now, because I've only built a very simple ski, I'm going to have to think about how that works. So I needed some kind of a rounded form which would sit on top of the ski, and then those pistons would or rods would hold that to the main structure. So again, I was thinking of as many appealing shapes as I could, with just keeping keeping it fairly low polygon, as you can see. So the leg looked very blocky, and it looked like the front leg of a camel in a way, which I wasn't overly happy with. But I thought if I get the rest of the components in there, it might start to break up the silhouette a little bit, and then I could add more. So this is the next bit I decided to do, was just build up the back of the ski there. So where those pistons go into the ski, I just thought it would be good to add a little bit of bulk, and maybe even later on add some pipes. So this is the ski itself. So I just went, again, very simple. Now you can do this low poly. Just made it very low poly count, probably the same as we were doing for the original cube. Then just shaped it up a little bit and then got it into place like that. So kept it nice and thin because it's obviously a ski. So that rounded form above it had to change to suit it. So now you can see it does look like we would use a low poly model that we would use in other programs, but you can see that there's no ability to cut the edge loops into a predictable way, and there's no way to take out polygons and add them back in, spin edge, and all of the tools that I've grown up with being able to use. So it is limited, I'll give you that. It is a limited way of thinking about this, but if this is all you've got, then actually this might be something that could be useful to you. And also, don't forget, you can start your models this way and then go high res with them and start chopping them and splitting them in the way that we would be more used to with Nomad. The split tool would be wonderful. It doesn't work particularly well with low poly, as it might be worth you trying that just to get an idea. So back onto the back end, and then just added some visual interest there, and then kind of brought it to a conclusion for this section. I added a lot of detail later on, and this is me photographing it now, just taking loads of pictures at this point. But then I did a lot of the low poly work, just went a little bit more detailed. So I didn't record all of this because I think you've got an idea of how I would do it. But then I started thinking about the windows and how to put a bit more interest on the body. And then what I'll do is I won't do it in this video because it's got to be long enough already, but what I'll do is I'll take this further in another video, and I may even be using armor paint to paint it once we've got it up and running. So let's see how we get on with it in the next video. I really hope you're enjoying these videos. I'm really enjoying being back doing Nomad videos after my little break. Please give it a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down if you don't. It all helps the algorithm. And don't forget to subscribe if you're not subscribed, and hit the notification bell so I can let you know when we upload new content. Don't forget, we've got a Nomad course. If you haven't even tried that, then it's worth having a look at that, and that can all be found down in the description. So please take a look if you want to get more learning on this subject. There's plenty of free stuff on the YouTube channel, so by all means go and look at those 60 or 70 videos before you start thinking about diving into the course. Have a wonderful week, everyone.